Operation Moolah was a United States Air Force effort during the Korean War to obtain, through defection, a fully capable Soviet MiG-15 jet fighter. Communist forces introduced the MiG-15 to Korea on November 1, 1950. U.S. Air Force pilots reported that the performance of the MiG-15 was superior to all United Nations aircraft, including the U.S. Air Force's new plane, the F-86 Sabre. In one day alone in 1951, a group of 30 of the nimble MiG-15 interceptors breezed through a cordon of 100 American escort fighters and shredded a formation of 36 B-29s. As many as a third of the bombers were shot to bits, and all without the loss of a single communist aircraft. UN commanders knew that they had to find a way to defeat the new jet. But to do so, they'd need to study one of the remarkable machines up close. Obtaining a functional MiG-15 became something of an obsession for Western intelligence. But getting one intact was proving to be difficult. Enter the U.S. Army's Psychological Warfare Division. In 1952, members of the top-secret outfit hatched a wild plan to lure disgruntled North Korean, Chinese, and even Soviet pilots into defecting with their MiGs. In exchange for delivering the jets, the pilots would receive $50,000 in cash, political asylum, and citizenship in the Western democracy of their choosing. As an added incentive, a cool $100,000 would go to the very first communist pilot to take the U.S. up on its offer. Appropriately, the operation was codenamed Moolah. If successful, the plan would not only deliver a prize piece of Soviet hardware into the hands of the U.S. military, but would also represent a propaganda victory against the communists. On the night of April 26, 1953, two B-29 Superfortress bombers dropped 1.2 million leaflets over communist bases in the Yaul River Basin. These leaflets were written in Russian, Chinese, and Korean. According to General Clark, immediately after the drop of the leaflets on April 26, UN aircraft did not make visual contact with any MiG aircraft for the following 8 days. Though weather may have been a factor, he opines that the leaflets had a direct effect and believes that senior communist military leaders began to screen for politically unreliable pilots. Incidentally, immediately after the leaflet drop in April, a radio jamming transmitter whose location could not be identified began to jam all UN Russian language broadcasts of General Clark's MiG-15 offer. But Chinese and Korean broadcasts were unhindered. The Korean Armistice Agreement was signed on July 27, 1953, ceasing all combat operations. Not one single pilot had defected to South Korea. The effectiveness of Operation Moolah was difficult to assess. Though UN forces did not recover a single MiG-15 aircraft, Operation Moolah did have residual effects on communist forces. There is some evidence to believe that the Soviet Union feared a defection from its pilots more than the Chinese or North Korean regimes. The fall morning of September 21st, North Korean fighter pilot No Kum-suk seized his chance to fly away. From Sunyang Air Base, Pyongyang, he climbed into the cockpit of a MiG-15. He was very familiar with the MiG controls, having flown more than 100 missions and won against American Sabre jets during the war. He also knew exactly where to find Kimpo, an American air base near Seoul in South Korea. He knew, too, how much fuel he would need for his 600-mile-an-hour escape in the gas-guzzling fighter. At 10 a.m., a long MiG-15 touched down at Kimpo Air Base in South Korea, almost without anyone noticing of No's arrival because the base's radar was turned off due to ongoing maintenance. He was immediately taken into the base's headquarters for interrogation and physical examination. According to No Kum-suk, he was unaware of the U.S.'s offer Operation Moolah. What motivated him to defect from North Korea was that he despised Kim Il-sung and the Communist Party and always dreamt for a better life living in the U.S. And even if North Korean pilots found out about the flyers, the reward would not have motivated any North Korean pilots to defect, for a number of reasons. First, the offer made available in April 1953 was advertised through leaflets dropped at North Korean air bases on the Yalu River. However, at that point in the war, all Russian, Chinese, and North Korean MiG-15s were stationed in Manchuria, so it was unlikely that any MiG-15 pilots had seen the leaflets. Secondly, Even if the U.S. Air Force had dropped leaflets in Manchuria, a North Korean pilot would not have trusted the authenticity of the offer, nor were the North Korean pilots generally aware of the purchasing power of the American dollar. Had Operation Moolah instead guaranteed freedom and a job in the United States, it would have been viewed as a more tempting offer. Even though No's defection was not directly influenced by Operation Moolah, it did allow the U.S. Air Force insight into the aircraft and the state of the Northern Air Forces. For the next several months, No answered numerous questions related to North Korea's military and the support it received from the Soviet Union and China. His aircraft was disassembled and loaded into a C-124 Globemaster and shipped off the next day to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa. Testing of the MiG-15 lasted 11 days. It revealed that the aircraft was a reasonably good fighter, but lacked the technological sophistication of an American aircraft, such as the F-86. Major Yeager was able to fly the aircraft to 0.98 Mach before it became dangerously uncontrollable. While the MiG-15 did have a faster climb rate and operated in higher altitude ceiling than the F-86, it suffered from problems with oscillation, poor pressurization, unexpected pitch-up at high speeds, unrecoverable spins, sudden stalls, and a particularly dangerous emergency fuel pump that could cause the aircraft to explode if improperly activated. Despite such shortcomings, Yeager and Collins determined that the MiG-15 and F-86 were equally capable. Pilot experience and training proved to be the most important factor during dogfights. After the testing of the MiG-15, it was again disassembled and each part was scrutinized and evaluated by engineers. The Americans offered to return the aircraft to North Korea, but there was no response. No Kum-suk was awarded the cash anyway and was later granted U.S. citizenship. He settled in the United States and earned an engineering degree from the University of Delaware. After a long career in the American aerospace industry, No became a university professor and even wrote a book about his defection entitled A MiG-15 to Freedom.